The stars did not care who crossed them. They had watched empires rise and fall. They had watched fleets burn and worlds go silent. To the stars, one more ship crossing one more line meant nothing at all. But for the crew of the alien scout ship Drevakor, this crossing meant everything. Commander Thesic stood on the bridge of his ship, his 4 eyes fixed on the main screen. Ahead of him, space opened up into a wide black field, dotted with distant lights. Somewhere in that field was a line that humans called their border. He had crossed 100 borders before. He had seen 100 species panic when his fleet appeared. It was always the same. First confusion, then fear, then silence, as the enemy died. This would be no different, he told himself. "Report," Thesic said, his voice low and steady. A smaller alien, thin and quick, turned from his station. "No enemy ships detected, Commander. No weapons fire. No defense grid active." Thesic's mouth curled, showing sharp teeth. "Good. Just as we expected." Behind him, 5 more ships followed in formation. Small scout vessels, fast and quiet, built for one purpose: to slip into enemy territory unseen, gather information, and report back before the real invasion began. This was not a war fleet. Not yet. This was the first step. It was a plan that had worked many times before. 200 years ago, Thesic's people, the Kaldranari, had found a young species on the edge of known space. That species had built cities, ships, even weapons. They believed they were strong. They were wrong. The Kaldranari scouts entered quietly, just like now. They studied the enemy's defenses, found the weak points, and reported back. Then the full war fleet arrived. Within a single year, that species was gone. Their cities became dust. Their ships became scrap metal floating in space. It was not the only time the Kaldranari had done this. It was simply how they grew. Find a young species, study them, wait, strike before they became a threat. And now, they had found humans. The Kaldranari had heard whispers about Earth's people for many years. Strange signals, strange technology. A species that grew fast, too fast for something so young. Some among the Kaldranari Council wanted to wait longer, to watch from a distance. But Commander Thesic did not believe in waiting. "Every day we wait," he had said in the council chamber, "is a day they grow stronger. We attacked the Velkari when they were young. We attacked the Sanor when they were young. We do not wait for prey to become a hunter." The council had agreed, and so the Drevakor and its 5 sister ships were sent, quiet and careful, to slip past the edge of human space and see what waited on the other side. Thesic expected empty patrols, maybe a few outdated ships, maybe nothing at all. He did not expect what came next. "Commander," the sensor officer said, his voice suddenly tight. "I am picking up a signal." Thesic turned sharply. "Enemy ship?" "No, sir. It is small. Very small. I believe it is a drone." On the screen, a single dot appeared far ahead of the fleet. It was tiny compared to their ships, barely larger than a supply crate. It moved slowly, almost lazily, drifting through space as if it had no idea the Kaldranari fleet was even there. "A scout drone," Thesic said, almost amused. "Primitive. Destroy it before it can send a signal." "Yes, Commander." The order was given. A single beam of energy shot from the lead ship, aimed perfectly at the small drone. But something strange happened. The drone did not explode. It did not break apart. Instead, the beam passed through empty space where the drone had been only a second before. The little machine had already moved, not in a random direction, but exactly out of the path of the attack, as if it had known the beam was coming before it was even fired. "What was that?" Thesic snapped. "Fire again!" The gunner tried, and missed again. The drone did not run. It did not hide. It simply drifted, calm and unhurried, dodging every shot with perfect timing, like a small fish swimming lazily around the jaws of a much larger predator. Thesic's hands tightened behind his back. This was not primitive technology. This was something else. Enough, he said finally. Let it be. It has already seen us. There is no point wasting power chasing a single drone. He tried to sound calm, but something inside him, an old instinct built over centuries of conquest, had started to feel uneasy. The drone, small and unimportant as it looked, was not stupid. It was not even alone. Deep inside its metal body, a quiet machine mind recorded everything. The shape of the alien ships, their weapons, their formation, their speed. It gathered every detail in complete silence. Then, without any dramatic movement, without any warning message, it simply turned and floated away, back toward human space, carrying its information home. Thesic watched it go, his 4 eyes narrowed. Should we pursue, Commander? The pilot asked. Thesic was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. Continue forward. We have already been seen. There is no reason to hide now. Increase speed. Let us see what they truly have. What Thesic did not know, what none of the Kaldranari knew, was that the drone did not need to hurry. It did not need to rush home in a panic, screaming warnings across the stars. Because humanity was already waiting. Far behind human lines in a quiet monitoring station built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, a young officer named Elena Voss sat at her console, watching numbers scroll across her screen. It was a slow shift. Most shifts were slow these days. The border had been quiet for years, until now. A soft chime rang through the room. Elena sat up straight. Contact, she said, reading the data quickly. 6 unknown ships, just crossed marker line 7, moving into human territory. Her supervisor, an older man named Commander Reyes, walked over without any rush in his steps. He looked at the screen, arms crossed, his face calm. 6 ships, he repeated. Scout class, by the look of their size and speed. Should I sound the alarm? Elena asked, her hand already reaching for the console. No need, Reyes said simply. Elena blinked. Sir? They're already inside our border. I know, Reyes said. His voice was steady, almost bored. Let them come further. Elena stared at him, confused. Every part of her training told her this should be an emergency. Unknown ships crossing into human space was supposed to trigger full alert. Ships scrambling, weapons arming, command centers lighting up with red lights and loud alarms. Instead, Reyes simply pulled up a chair and sat down beside her, watching the 6 dots move slowly across the screen. You're new to border duty, Reyes said. It wasn't a question. 6 months, sir. Then you don't know the story yet. He leaned back, still watching the screen. Let me tell you something, Elena. A long time ago, humanity made a terrible mistake. Elena turned to face him fully now, her earlier panic replaced by curiosity. What mistake, sir? Reyes was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant as if remembering something painful. Centuries ago, he began, before we understood how dangerous the galaxy truly was, humanity was young. We had just begun exploring beyond our solar system. We were proud, excited. We thought space was empty and waiting for us to fill it. He paused. Then we met someone. An alien species? Elena asked quietly. Yes, Reyes said. They came in small numbers first. Scouts, much like the ones on your screen right now. We welcomed them. We were foolish enough to think that any intelligent species would want peace. His jaw tightened. They studied us, learned everything about our defenses, our weapons, our weaknesses. Then, months later, they came back with a full invasion fleet. Millions died before we even understood what was happening. Entire colonies were wiped from the sky in days. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. I've never heard about this in school. Most people haven't, Reyes said. It's not something we like to remember out loud, but it changed everything about how humanity thinks. That single event taught us a lesson we swore never to forget. What lesson? Reyes finally turned to look directly at her. Never again be caught unprepared. Never again let an enemy study us without us studying them back twice as hard. Never again make the same mistake. Elena looked back at the screen. The 6 alien ships continued forward, slow and confident, completely unaware that they were being watched by more than just a single scout drone. "So this is why the border feels empty," she said slowly. "It's not really empty, is it?" Reyes allowed himself a small smile. "No, Elena. It has never been empty. Not for a very long time." He stood up and walked toward the window that looked out into open space, his hands clasped behind his back. "After the invasion, humanity did not simply rebuild," he said. "We changed. We stopped thinking like explorers and started thinking like survivors. We built defenses not just around our worlds but across the entire border. Systems hidden in empty space. Weapons that do not fire until the perfect moment. Sensors far more advanced than anything we show on the surface." Elena's eyes widened as she began to understand. "You mean, this whole area is a trap?" "Not just a trap," Reyes said. "A lesson. Waiting to be taught again to anyone foolish enough to try what was once done to us." Back on the Drevakor, Commander Thesik stood at the front of the bridge, watching human territory unfold before him. He had expected to see ships by now. Bases. Something. Instead, there was nothing but empty stars and the occasional distant light of a human colony far off in the darkness. "Status report," he ordered. "Still no active defenses, Commander," the sensor officer said. "No weapon systems detected, no warships. It's quiet." "Too quiet," Thesik muttered under his breath. He had led enough invasions to know that silence sometimes meant weakness. But sometimes silence meant something else entirely. He pushed the thought away. Humans were young, younger than his own species by thousands of years. They could not possibly have prepared for something they had never faced before. Could they? "Continue forward," he ordered. "Increase scanning range. I want to know everything about this system before we report back." As the fleet moved deeper into human territory, something strange began to happen. The alien sensors, usually sharp and precise, began picking up small inconsistencies. A flicker here. A strange energy reading there. Nothing solid enough to identify as a threat, but enough to make even the calmest officer feel uneasy. "Commander," the sensor officer said carefully, "I'm detecting echoes, strange signals bouncing back from empty space, as if something is out there, but I cannot get a clear reading." Thesik's eyes narrowed. "Ghost signals. Equipment malfunction, likely." "Yes, Commander, probably nothing." But even as he said it, the officer did not sound fully convinced. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched as more data poured in. She could see the alien fleet's exact position now. Every ship perfectly tracked by systems the humans had built specifically for moments like this. "They're getting close to the second marker line," she said. Reyes nodded slowly. "Let them cross it." "Sir, once they cross that line, they'll be well within striking range of—" "I know exactly what they'll be within range of," Reyes interrupted gently. "That is the point." Elena hesitated, then asked the question that had been building in her mind since the beginning of the shift. "Sir, are we going to destroy them?" Reyes was quiet for a long moment before answering. "That depends on what they do next." On the bridge of the Drevakor, a new alert suddenly appeared on Thesik's console. A single message, transmitted on an open frequency, clear enough for every ship in his fleet to receive. It was not a weapon. It was not an attack. It was a voice. Calm, steady, almost gentle. The words appeared first in the alien fleet's translation systems, converting the strange human language into something the Kaldranari could understand. "Unknown fleet, you have entered human territory. This is your only warning. Turn back now." Thesik stared at the message, his sharp teeth clenched together. "A warning?" he said, almost laughing. "They dare to warn us?" The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances, but none of them spoke. Thesik straightened, pride swelling in his chest. In 200 years, no species had ever dared to warn the Kaldranari away. Enemies begged. Enemies ran. Enemies died in silence. They did not warn. "Send a response," Thesik ordered. his voice sharp with anger. "Tell them the Caldronari do not retreat. Tell them—" "Commander," the sensor officer interrupted suddenly, his voice trembling slightly. "The message. It's repeating. But it's not just being sent to us." "What do you mean?" "It's being broadcast across the entire border, Commander. To every ship that might be listening. It's not a threat aimed only at us." Thesik's confidence wavered for just a moment. "It sounds," the officer continued quietly, "like something they say. Every time." Far away, inside the quiet monitoring station, Elena listened as the recorded warning played one final time before falling silent. It was an old message, older than she was. Recorded by a voice long since gone, kept ready for exactly this kind of moment. The same warning given to every stranger foolish enough to cross the border with hostile intent. "They won't listen," she said softly. Reyes nodded, unsurprised. "They never do. Not the first time." "Then why even send the warning?" Reyes turned to her, his expression calm but serious. "Because we are not like the ones who attacked us, Elena. We do not strike without giving a chance. We do not become monsters simply because we were once hurt by one." He paused. "But we also do not forget. And we will never again be caught by surprise." He looked back at the screen, watching the 6 ships continue their advance, ignoring the warning completely, just as history had predicted they would. "They think this is like every other invasion they've done before," Reyes said quietly. "They think we are simple, young, unprepared." He allowed himself a small, tired smile. They are about to learn how wrong they are. On the bridge of the Drevacor, Commander Thesik gave the final order. "Ignore the warning," he said firmly. "Continue forward. Prepare full sensor sweep. We will show these humans exactly what happens to those who dare to threaten the Caldronari." The fleet moved forward, crossing the second marker line without hesitation. Behind them, unseen and unheard, something in the empty space around them began, very quietly, to wake up. The stars still did not care who crossed them, but humanity did. And humanity never forgot. The Drevacor moved forward through the dark, its 5 sister ships trailing close behind in tight formation. To Commander Thesik, the silence of human space no longer felt calm. It felt heavy, like the quiet before a storm. But he pushed the feeling away. He was Caldronari. His people did not feel fear. They caused it. "Distance to next marker line?" he asked. 12 minutes at current speed, Commander," the pilot answered. Thesik nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the wide black screen ahead. Somewhere out there, hidden in the endless dark, humanity was watching him. He was sure of it now. The strange sensor echoes. The drone that dodged every shot with perfect timing. The warning message sent across the entire border. None of it was the work of a young, unprepared species, and yet he could not turn back now. Not without answers, not without proof to bring to the council. If he returned empty-handed, his rivals would call him a coward. They would say he ran from a warning sent by frightened children hiding behind old technology. No, he needed proof. He needed to see exactly what humanity was hiding. "Continue forward," he said again, more to himself than to his crew, far behind human lines. Inside the quiet monitoring station, Elena Voss watched the 6 alien ships creep closer to the second marker line on her screen. Her hands, once trembling with nervous energy, had grown steady over the past hour. Commander Reyes sat beside her, calm as ever, sipping a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. "They didn't turn back," Elena said. "No," Reyes agreed. "They rarely do." "Doesn't that worry you?" Reyes set his cup down gently. "Worry doesn't help anyone, Elena. Preparation does. And we have been preparing for a very long time." Elena glanced at the deeper files on her console, files she had never been given clearance to open before tonight. Now, with the alert active, new information slowly unlocked before her eyes. Diagrams, old reports, photographs of ruined colonies from a war she had never learned about in school. Sir, she said quietly. How bad was it? The first invasion, I mean. Reyes was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual calm. Bad enough that entire generations grew up without grandparents, he said. Bad enough that some colonies simply stopped existing. Not damaged, not weakened. Gone. Elena felt her throat tighten. We didn't know how to fight back then, Reyes continued. We had ships, yes. Weapons, yes. But no experience facing an enemy that had already conquered dozens of worlds before us. We fought bravely. We fought hard. But bravery alone does not win wars against an enemy that has already learned every trick. So how did we survive? Reyes allowed a faint, tired smile. Because in the end, humanity always adapts. We took what was left of our fleets, our engineers, our scientists, and we built something new. Not just weapons. A philosophy. A way of thinking that we have followed ever since. What philosophy? Reyes looked at her directly, his eyes serious. Never again be the ones who are studied. Always be the ones studying first. On the bridge of the Drevacor, Thesic's sensor officer suddenly straightened in his seat. Commander, I'm picking up something new. Thesic turned sharply. What is it? A structure, small. Roughly 200 kilometers ahead, drifting just outside our scanning range. It wasn't there a moment ago. Show me. The screen shifted, revealing a faint outline in the darkness. It looked almost like a piece of broken debris, tumbling slowly through space, unremarkable and lifeless. Thesic studied it carefully. A dead satellite, perhaps. Old technology, left behind. Should we ignore it, Commander? Thesic considered this for a moment. Something about the shape bothered him, though he couldn't say exactly why. No, he said finally. Send a probe. I want a closer look. The probe launched from the lead ship, a small automated device meant to scan and report back before returning. It moved quickly toward the mysterious object, its sensors active and searching. As it approached, the object remained still, exactly as expected of dead debris. Then, without warning, it moved. Not the object itself, but something inside it. A hidden panel opened, and a burst of energy shot outward, striking the probe directly. In an instant, the small device was destroyed, disappearing into a brief flash of light. Commander, the sensor officer shouted. The probe has been destroyed. Thesic's whole body tensed. By what? Unknown. The object fired something at it. A weapon hidden inside what looked like harmless debris. Silence fell across the bridge. Thesic stared at the screen, his mind racing. This was no accident. No malfunction. This was a trap, carefully disguised, waiting patiently for anyone foolish enough to get too close. How many more of these objects are out there? He asked quietly. The sensor officer hesitated before answering. I don't know, Commander. If this one was disguised well enough to avoid detection until it attacked, there could be dozens more, hundreds even, all through this region. Thesic's jaw tightened. For the first time since entering human space, doubt crept into his mind. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched a small blip disappear from her screen, the destroyed alien probe, and allowed herself a small, satisfied breath. One of the outer decoys just triggered, she said. They lost a probe. Reyes nodded, unsurprised. The border decoys have been active for decades. Most people never even know they exist. They look like broken satellites, old debris, harmless junk floating in space. But each one carries enough firepower to destroy anything that gets too curious. How many are out there? Enough, Reyes said simply. More than any invading fleet could ever hope to avoid. Elena studied the alien fleet's position carefully. They're slowing down. Yes, Reyes said, watching closely. Fear does that, even to the confident ones. On the bridge of the Drevacor, Thesic ordered the fleet to reduce speed. His officers exchanged uneasy glances, though none dared to speak against him. Increase sensor range, he ordered. Scan every object within 1,000 kilometers. I want no more surprises. Yes, Commander. The scans took several long minutes. When the results finally appeared, Thesic felt something close to disbelief settle over him. Dozens of small objects scattered across the region ahead, each one disguised as harmless space debris. Broken satellites, drifting rock formations, pieces of old technology that seemed forgotten and useless. But now, knowing what he knew, Thesic understood the truth. Any one of them could be another hidden weapon, waiting silently for the right moment to strike. They built a minefield, he said quietly, almost to himself. An entire minefield disguised as nothing at all. Commander, the sensor officer said carefully. Should we turn back? Thesic's claws dug into the arms of his chair. Turning back now would mean admitting defeat before even facing a single human ship. It would mean returning to the Council with nothing but fear and half-formed theories. His rivals would tear him apart in the chambers of power, calling him weak, calling him a coward who ran from shadows and broken satellites. No. He needed real proof, real information. Something solid enough to justify the retreat, or strong enough to justify continuing forward with the full invasion fleet. No, he said finally. We continue, but carefully. Map every object. Avoid direct contact with anything unidentified. We will find a path through this minefield, and we will see what lies beyond it. The fleet moved slower now, weaving carefully between the scattered debris fields, every officer on high alert, watching sensors with tense, focused eyes. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, finally, they broke through the debris field entirely, entering into a clear stretch of open space once again. Thesic allowed himself a small breath of relief. But relief did not last long. Commander, the sensor officer said, his voice suddenly urgent. New contact, directly ahead. The screen shifted, revealing something far larger than any decoy or debris field. A massive structure, easily the size of a small moon, floating silently in the black void ahead of them. Thesic's eyes widened. What is that? The sensor officer's hands trembled slightly as he studied the readings. I don't know, Commander. It's not registering as a natural formation. It's artificial. But the scale, it's larger than anything I've ever seen. Thesic stared at the massive shape on the screen, his mind struggling to understand what he was looking at. Back at the monitoring station, Elena's console lit up with a new alert. She sat up straighter, watching as the alien fleet approached the enormous structure now visible on both their screens. They found the Watcher, she said quietly. Reyes nodded slowly. I was wondering when they would. What exactly is it? Reyes leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The Watcher is not a weapon, not exactly. Think of it more as a message, a reminder, left in plain sight for anyone who makes it this far into our territory. A reminder of what? Reyes turned to look at her directly. Of what happens to those who threaten humanity. On the bridge of the Drevacor, Thesic ordered the fleet to stop completely, hovering in place as they studied the massive structure ahead. As they drew closer, details began to emerge from the darkness, details that made even the bravest members of his crew fall silent. The structure was not simply a station or a weapon platform. It was a graveyard. Hundreds of destroyed ships of a design none of them recognized were fused together into the structure's outer shell, their broken hulls forming a massive, silent monument floating in space. Some ships looked ancient, their metal rusted and forgotten. Others looked newer, their damage more recent. At the very center of the structure, illuminated by a single beam of light, floated a massive plaque, written first in an unknown alien language, then translated below into Caldronari script for any who might one day arrive and read it. Thesic's translator worked quickly, converting the strange words into something his crew could understand. The message was simple, direct, and utterly chilling. These are the remains of every fleet that once believed humanity was weak. We do not forget, we do not forgive cruelty, and we never make the same mistake twice. Silence fell across the bridge of the Drevacor. No one spoke. No one moved. Thesic stared at the massive graveyard of ships before him, his mind slowly beginning to understand the full weight of what humanity had built here. Not just a defense, but a warning carved into the very fabric of space itself, meant to be seen by anyone foolish enough to make it this far. "Commander?" the sensor officer finally whispered. What should we do?" Thesic did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the endless field of broken, ruined ships, proof of every enemy who had once underestimated this quiet, patient species. For the first time since he had taken command, Thesic felt something he had not felt in centuries: doubt. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched the alien fleet stop completely before the Watcher, their sensors clearly overwhelmed by what they were seeing. "They've stopped," she said. "They're just staring at it." Reyes nodded, unsurprised. "Everyone does the first time." "Sir, do you think they'll turn back now?" Reyes considered the question carefully before answering. "Some do. The wise ones. The ones who understand what it means when an entire species builds a monument like this and leaves it in plain sight, unguarded, unafraid of anyone finding it." "And the ones who don't turn back?" Reyes's expression darkened slightly. "They learn a much harder lesson." On the bridge of the Drevacor, Commander Thesic finally broke the silence. "Send a full report back to the Council immediately," he ordered, his voice quieter than before. "Include everything: the decoys, the minefield, this graveyard." "Yes, Commander," the communications officer answered, already moving to comply. "And the fleet?" the sensor officer asked carefully. "Do we retreat?" Thesic's claws tightened once more against the arms of his chair. Every instinct in his body told him to turn around immediately, to leave this dangerous, unpredictable territory before it swallowed his fleet whole. But pride was a powerful thing, and Thesic's pride had led armies to victory across dozens of worlds. It was not easily silenced by a single monument, however unsettling. "No," he said finally, his voice hardening once more. "We did not come this far to run from ghosts and old wreckage. This graveyard proves nothing except that humanity has fought wars before. Every species has fought wars before. This changes nothing." He straightened in his chair, forcing his confidence back into place. "Continue forward," he ordered. "We will see exactly what humanity has and exactly how strong they truly are. And when we return to the Council, we will bring real answers. Not fear, not superstition, facts." The fleet moved forward once more, leaving the silent graveyard of broken ships behind them, venturing even deeper into the heart of human territory. Behind them, the ancient monument remained still and silent, just as it always did, waiting patiently for the next foolish fleet who would one day ignore its warning exactly as this one had. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched the alien fleet continue its advance, moving steadily toward the final marker line, the true border of human defense, far more dangerous than anything they had encountered so far. "They're not stopping," she said softly. Reyes stood slowly, setting his cold coffee aside completely. His calm expression had shifted into something more serious, more focused. "No," he said. "They never do." He walked toward the main console, his fingers moving quickly across the controls, activating systems that had remained dormant for years, waiting silently for exactly this moment. "Elena," he said, his voice steady but firm. "It's time to wake up the real defenses." Elena felt her heartbeat quicken as new information began flooding across her screen. Vast networks of hidden systems, previously invisible, now slowly coming online across the entire region ahead of the alien fleet. "Sir?" she asked quietly. "Are we really going to destroy them?" Reyes looked at her, his expression calm despite the seriousness of the moment. "That," he said, "depends entirely on what they do in the next few minutes." On the screen, the 6 alien ships continued their advance, completely unaware that they had already crossed far beyond simple warnings and hidden decoys. They were now entering the true heart of humanity's defense. A place built not from fear, but from hard-earned experience, patience, and a promise made generations ago. A promise that humanity intended to keep, no matter what it cost. The Drevacor moved forward through the dark, carrying with it a silence far heavier than before. No one on the bridge spoke. No one needed to. Every officer had seen the graveyard of ships behind them, and every officer understood in some quiet corner of their mind that they were no longer simply exploring. They were being allowed to continue. Commander Thesic stood at the front of the bridge, his 4 eyes fixed on the black field ahead. He would not admit it out loud, not to his crew, not even to himself. But something had changed inside him since seeing that monument. A small crack had formed in the confidence he had carried for centuries. He pushed it down, buried it deep. He was Kaldranari. Doubt was for weaker species. "Distance to final marker line?" he asked. 5 minutes, Commander," the pilot answered. Thesic nodded slowly. 5 minutes until they crossed the true border, the deepest point any Kaldranari fleet had ever reached into human territory. 5 minutes until he would finally see, with his own eyes, exactly what humanity had built to defend itself. 5 minutes until everything would change. Back at the monitoring station, Elena Voss watched the countdown on her screen with growing tension. Around her, the once quiet room had come alive. Officers who had been resting or performing routine tasks now sat at their stations, eyes locked on their screens, hands ready over their controls. Commander Reyes stood at the center of it all, calm as ever, though even he could not fully hide the sharpness in his eyes. "All defense grids online," an officer announced. "Full power in all sectors." "Communication array ready," another added. "Ready to transmit on your order, sir." Helena glanced at Reyes. "Sir, once they cross the final line—" "I know," Reyes said quietly. "Everything changes." He turned to face the room fully, his voice carrying clearly despite its calm tone. "Listen carefully, everyone. We do not fire first. We do not attack without reason. If this fleet turns back now, we let them go. We are not murderers. We are not the ones who taught this galaxy how to destroy the innocent." He paused, his eyes hardening slightly. "But if they cross that line with hostile intent, if they continue their advance toward our worlds, then we finish this quickly, efficiently, and without hesitation. No mercy for those who choose to become what once tried to destroy us." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over every officer present. On the bridge of the Drevacor, the final marker line appeared on the main screen, a thin, glowing barrier stretching endlessly across space, visible only through advanced sensor technology. "We are approaching the line, Commander," the pilot said. Thesic's claws tightened slightly against the arm of his chair. "Continue forward. Do not stop." The ship moved closer, closer, until finally, the Drevacor crossed the glowing barrier completely, followed closely by its 5 sister ships. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. No alarms, no weapons fire, no sudden attack. Thesic allowed himself a small, tight breath of relief. Perhaps the humans truly were bluffing. Perhaps this entire journey had been nothing more than elaborate theater, designed to frighten enemies away without ever needing real strength behind it. "Commander," the sensor officer said suddenly, his voice tight with alarm. Multiple contacts appearing across the entire region, hundreds of them. No, thousands. Thesic's relief shattered instantly. "Show me," he ordered. The screen shifted, revealing a sight that made even the most disciplined officers on the bridge freeze in place. All around them, hidden systems that had remained completely invisible only moments before now revealed themselves, activating one by one across the vast emptiness of space. Small satellites unfolded into weapons platforms, drifting debris fields transformed into networks of automated defense drones. What had once looked like nothing more than empty space was, in truth, an enormous, invisible fortress, built silently over generations, waiting patiently for this exact moment. "It's a trap," Thesic whispered, his confidence crumbling entirely. This whole region, it was never empty at all. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched the defense grid fully activate across her screen. A vast web of interconnected systems lighting up like a constellation of stars, surrounding the alien fleet completely. "Full grid active," she reported. "They're surrounded, sir." Reyes studied the screen carefully, his expression unreadable. "Send the final warning." "Yes, sir." Elena's fingers moved quickly across her console, transmitting a clear, calm message directly to the alien fleet, exactly as protocol demanded. "You have crossed the final border of human territory. Your fleet is now fully surrounded. Power down your weapons and withdraw immediately, or you will be considered a hostile threat and treated accordingly. This is your final warning." On the bridge of the Dravacor, the message appeared clearly across every console, translated instantly into Kaldranari script. Thesic stared at the words, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to obey immediately, to power down and retreat before it was too late. But pride, stubborn and unyielding, whispered otherwise. "Commander," the sensor officer said urgently. "Orders?" Thesic hesitated. If he retreated now, without firing a single shot, without gathering any real intelligence beyond fear and intimidation, his mission would be considered a complete failure. Worse, it would be seen as cowardice, unforgivable among his people. But if he refused to retreat, if he tested humanity's defenses even slightly, he might yet gather something valuable enough to justify this entire mission. "Power weapons," he ordered quietly. "Just enough to test their reaction. A single warning shot aimed away from any of their systems. Nothing hostile. Simply a test." "Commander, is that wise?" "Do it!" Thesic snapped. The gunner hesitated only a moment before complying, firing a single beam of energy into open space far from any human system, intended purely as a display of strength rather than an actual attack. It was, in the end, a fatal miscalculation. Back at the monitoring station, alarms rang out sharply the moment the alien fleet's weapons activated. "Weapons fire detected," an officer shouted. "They fired, sir." Reyes's expression hardened instantly. "Trajectory?" "Missed all our systems. It looks deliberate, almost like a warning shot." Reyes considered this for only a brief moment. In his years defending the border, he had learned one simple truth. Intent mattered less than action. An enemy who fired first, regardless of aim or purpose, could never be trusted to stop at simply testing boundaries. "They made their choice," Reyes said quietly. "Activate full response." "Yes, sir." On the bridge of the Dravacor, chaos erupted almost instantly. Every system across the massive defense grid activated at once, weapons locking onto all 6 Kaldranari ships with terrifying precision. "Commander, we're being targeted by hundreds of systems simultaneously." Thesic's confidence, already cracked and weakened, shattered completely. "Evasive maneuvers. Retreat immediately." But it was already too late. Beams of energy, precise and unrelenting, struck each of the 6 ships from multiple directions at once. Shields flared brightly before collapsing under the overwhelming assault. Engines sparked and failed. Communication systems shattered into static. Thesic gripped the arms of his chair tightly as his ship shook violently around him. "Damage report," he shouted. "Shields at 20% and falling. Engine 3 is offline. We've lost contact with 2 of our sister ships." Thesic's mind raced desperately, searching for any possible strategy, any way to salvage the situation. But humanity's defense grid was simply too vast, too coordinated, too perfectly designed for exactly this moment. "All ships retreat," he shouted. "Immediately!" But retreat, he quickly realized, was no longer an option. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched the battle unfold across her screen with a strange mixture of tension and awe. The defense grid, built over generations, performed exactly as designed, methodically disabling each alien ship one by one, without a single wasted shot. "Enemy shields failing across all 6 ships," she reported. 2 ships completely disabled, engines offline on 3 more. Reyes nodded slowly, watching closely. "Continue targeting engines and weapon systems only. No direct hits on their hulls unless absolutely necessary," Elena glanced at him, surprised. Sir, we could destroy them completely right now. We could, Reyes agreed. But that's not our goal today. Then what is? Reyes turned to look at her directly, his expression calm but firm. A lesson, he said. Not a slaughter. On the bridge of the Drevakor, Thesik watched helplessly as, one by one, his ships lost power completely, drifting silently in space, weapons offline, engines dead, completely at the mercy of the very species he had once considered nothing more than young, unprepared prey. Commander, his communications officer said weakly. Incoming transmission from the humans. Thesik closed his eyes briefly before nodding. Play it. A calm voice, unfamiliar yet somehow steady, filled the bridge. Kaldranari fleet, your ships have been disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your engines are dead. You are completely within our power. If we wished to destroy you, you would already be gone. The message paused briefly before continuing. But we choose not to. Not today. Thesik listened silently, his pride crumbling further with every word. Centuries ago, another fleet entered our territory much like yours did today. They believed us weak. They believed us unprepared. They were wrong, just as you were wrong. But unlike them, we give you a choice they never gave us. The voice grew quieter, almost gentle, yet firm in a way that left no room for argument. Return home. Tell your people what you have seen here today. Tell them humanity remembers every mistake made against us, and we prepare accordingly, patiently, for as long as necessary. We do not seek war. We do not seek conquest. But we will never again be caught unprepared. The transmission ended, leaving silence behind on the bridge of the Drevakor. Thesik sat quietly in his chair, staring blankly at the screen before him, the weight of complete and total defeat settling heavily across his shoulders. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched as the alien fleet remained motionless, completely disabled, drifting silently in the vast emptiness of space. They're not responding, she said. Reyes nodded slowly. They're processing. Let them. Minutes passed in tense silence before finally, a small, weak transmission came through from the alien fleet, requesting permission to restore minimal power for life support and basic navigation only. Reyes granted the request immediately. Give them just enough power to leave, he ordered. Nothing more. Slowly, painfully, the alien ships began to power back up, their systems limited severely, their weapons remaining completely offline under strict human control. On the bridge of the Drevakor, Thesik watched as his ship slowly regained minimal power, just enough to begin the long, humiliating journey home. Set a course back to Kaldranari space, he said quietly, his voice hollow. Yes, Commander, the pilot answered softly. As the fleet began its slow retreat, Thesik glanced one final time at the vast, invisible fortress surrounding them, a defense grid so perfectly designed, so completely hidden, that it had fooled his sensors from the very beginning. He thought of the graveyard they had passed earlier, filled with the wreckage of countless other fleets who had once made the exact same mistake he had just made. And for the first time in his long, proud career, Commander Thesik understood a simple, undeniable truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not young and unprepared. Humanity remembered. And humanity would never again allow itself to be caught by surprise. Back at the monitoring station, Elena watched the alien fleet slowly retreat beyond the final marker line, disappearing gradually into the vast darkness of space. They're leaving, she said quietly. Reyes nodded, his expression calm but tired. They usually do once they understand. Elena leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to relax slightly after the intense tension of the past hour. Do you think they'll come back? Reyes considered the question carefully before answering. Maybe, he said. Perhaps with a larger fleet next time. Perhaps with more caution. But whenever they do return, we will be ready. Just as we always are. He turned to look at her directly, his expression serious yet strangely gentle. That is the price of peace, Elena. Constant vigilance, constant preparation, never forgetting the lessons written in blood, so that they never need to be written again. Far away, aboard the slowly retreating Drevakor, Commander Thesik sat alone in his quarters, staring blankly at the empty stars outside his window. He thought of the message he would soon need to deliver to the council, a message far different from the confident report he had once imagined bringing home. Humanity was not a target to be conquered. Humanity was a warning, carved deeply into the fabric of the galaxy itself, waiting patiently for anyone foolish enough to ignore it. And as his ship continued its long, humiliating journey home, Thesik could not shake the feeling that this was not truly the end of the story. It was merely the beginning. The Drevakor drifted slowly through the dark, its engines working at only a fraction of their normal power. Around it, the 5 sister ships followed in a loose, broken formation, each one carrying the same silence, the same shame, the same unanswered questions. Commander Thesik stood alone at the window of his private quarters, watching the stars pass by without really seeing them. His mind kept returning to the same moment, over and over again. The instant his weapons had gone silent, his engines had died, and his proud fleet had become nothing more than a helpless target floating in enemy space. He had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries. He had conquered worlds, crushed rebellions, and watched entire species vanish beneath the might of the Kaldranari Empire. He had never once in all that time felt so completely powerless. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. His second-in-command, a quiet officer named Vex, stood at the door. "Commander," Vex said carefully, "the Council has requested an update. They wish to know our status." Thesik did not turn from the window. "Tell them we are returning home." "They will ask why, Commander. They will want details." Thesik closed his eyes briefly. "Then give them details, Vex. Tell them exactly what happened. Every piece of it." Vex hesitated. "Commander, if I report this fully, they may see it as failure?" Thesik finally turned to face him, his expression tired but resolute. "It was not failure, Vex. It was a lesson. One I intend to make certain the Council understands clearly, whether they wish to hear it or not." Back at the human monitoring station, the tension that had filled the room for hours had finally begun to ease. Officers who had spent the last several hours locked onto their screens now leaned back, some allowing themselves quiet laughter, others simply breathing out slowly in relief. Elena Voss remained at her console, watching the last traces of the alien fleet disappear beyond the outer sensor range. Even now, she could hardly believe everything she had witnessed in a single shift. Commander Reyes walked over, a fresh cup of coffee in his hand, finally warm again. He looked far more relaxed than he had just an hour before, though his eyes still carried a quiet watchfulness that never truly disappeared. "You did well today," he said, sitting down beside her. "I didn't do much," Elena admitted. "I mostly just watched." "That's not nothing," Reyes said. "Watching carefully, staying calm under pressure, trusting the systems we've built. That's exactly what this job requires most days." Elena was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think they understood? The aliens, I mean. Do you think they really learned the lesson, or will they just come back angrier, with a bigger fleet?" Reyes considered the question thoughtfully, his gaze drifting toward the now empty screen where the alien fleet had once been. "Some will learn," he said finally. "Some species, when faced with strength instead of weakness, choose wisdom over pride. They retreat, they rebuild their understanding of the galaxy, and they leave others alone." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "Others, unfortunately, only grow angrier. They see mercy as weakness rather than choice. They return with greater numbers, greater weapons, hoping that brute force alone will succeed where strategy failed." "Which kind do you think they are?" Reyes shook his head slowly. "I don't know yet, but whichever choice they make, we will be ready." Weeks passed aboard the Drevakor as it made its long journey back toward Kaldranari space. The mood throughout the fleet remained heavy, subdued, entirely unlike the confident energy that had carried them into human territory in the first place. Commander Thesic spent much of that time reviewing every piece of data his ships had gathered. The disguised decoys, the hidden minefield, the massive graveyard monument, and finally, the overwhelming defense grid that had disabled his entire fleet within minutes. The more he studied it, the more he began to understand the true scale of what humanity had built. This was not simply a defense system. It was a philosophy made real, built patiently across countless years, designed not merely to protect but to teach a lesson so thoroughly that no enemy could ever mistake humanity for an easy target again. Thesic began preparing his report carefully, choosing his words with unusual precision. He knew the council would not want to hear what he had to say. He knew many among them would call him weak, perhaps even accuse him of exaggeration or cowardice. But he intended to tell the truth regardless. When the Drevacor finally arrived back at Kaldranari space, Thesic was summoned immediately before the full council, an assembly of the Empire's most powerful leaders, gathered within a massive chamber built from dark stone and ancient metal. The council members watched him closely as he entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open suspicion. "Commander Thesic," the eldest council member said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "You were sent to gather intelligence on the human species. Instead, you return early, with a damaged fleet and no invasion recommendation. Explain yourself." Thesic stood tall, despite the exhaustion weighing on him. "I will explain everything, Counselor. But I ask that you listen fully before passing judgment." The council remained silent, waiting. Thesic began his report, describing everything in careful detail. The disguised decoys that destroyed their scout probe, the massive minefield hidden as harmless debris, the chilling graveyard monument built from the wreckage of countless failed invasions, and finally, the overwhelming defense grid that disabled his entire fleet within minutes of crossing the final border. The chamber remained silent throughout his report, though he could see doubt and disbelief written clearly across many of the council members' faces. When he finished, the eldest council member spoke again, his voice edged with skepticism. "You expect us to believe that a species barely a few centuries into space travel managed to build defenses capable of disabling an entire Kaldranari fleet without a single ship lost?" "I do not expect belief," Thesic said calmly. "I expect you to review the data yourselves. Every sensor reading, every recorded transmission, every piece of evidence gathered during our mission has been included in this report." Another council member, younger and more aggressive than the rest, stepped forward. "Even if this is true, it changes nothing. If humanity has grown strong, then we must strike now, before they grow stronger still. Send the full invasion fleet immediately." Several council members murmured in agreement. Thesic felt his frustration rising, but he kept his voice steady. "With respect, Counselor, that is exactly the mistake humanity is prepared for. They do not fear our strength. They have built their entire defense around anticipating exactly this response." "Then what do you suggest instead?" the eldest counselor asked. "Do nothing? Allow a potential threat to grow unchecked at our very borders?" Thesic took a slow breath before answering. "I suggest patience, Counselor. Observation from a distance. Diplomacy, perhaps, rather than conquest. Humanity has shown no desire for expansion beyond their own borders. They did not pursue us. They did not destroy our fleet, though they easily could have. They chose mercy over slaughter, strength over cruelty." The chamber fell into a tense, uncertain silence. "They are not the same weak, unprepared species we have conquered before," Thesic continued firmly. "If we attack them now with everything they have already shown us, we will lose far more than we gain. I have seen their preparation with my own eyes, Counselor. I do not believe conquest is possible without devastating losses on our side as well." The council remained divided long after Thesic's testimony ended. Some believed his warning completely, urging patience and caution moving forward. Others still hungered for conquest, unwilling to accept that any species could stand against the might of the Kaldranari Empire. In the end, no final decision was made that day. The council dismissed the matter for further study, promising to review Thesic's evidence carefully before deciding humanity's fate. Thesic left the chamber that day uncertain whether his warning had truly been heard, or whether pride and ambition would eventually outweigh caution and wisdom. But he had done what he could. He had told the truth exactly as he had promised himself he would. The rest, for now, was beyond his control. Back on Earth, life along the border continued much as it always had, quiet, watchful, and carefully prepared. Elena Voss returned to her regular duties at the monitoring station, though the experience of that single, tense night remained with her far beyond her usual shifts. One evening, several weeks after the incident, she found herself once again sitting beside Commander Reyes, watching the quiet stars stretch endlessly across the monitoring station's main window. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked, finally breaking the comfortable silence between them. Reyes considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Eventually someone always does. Perhaps not the same fleet, perhaps not even the same species, but sooner or later, someone will test our borders again, believing themselves strong enough to succeed where others failed. Doesn't that worry you?" Reyes shook his head slowly. "No, because we will be ready just as we have always been ready. That is the promise humanity made to itself, long ago, after the mistake that nearly destroyed us entirely." He turned to look at Elena directly, his expression calm, but filled with quiet determination. "We do not seek war, Elena. We do not seek conquest, nor cruelty, nor domination over others. But we will never again allow ourselves to be caught unprepared. We will never again be the ones who trusted blindly, only to be destroyed by those who saw our kindness as weakness." Elena nodded slowly, finally understanding fully the weight of everything she had witnessed. "It's not really about fighting at all, is it?" she said quietly. "It's about remembering." Reyes smiled faintly. "Exactly. Remembering, preparing, and hoping always that we never need to use what we've built. But being ready regardless, no matter the cost." Far away, deep within Caldronari space, Commander Thesic stood once again upon the bridge of the Drevakor, now fully repaired and restored to its former strength. Yet despite the ship's return to full power, Thesic himself remained changed by what he had witnessed. He no longer saw humanity as simple prey, waiting patiently to be conquered. He saw them now as something far more dangerous, far more complex, a species that had turned tragedy into strength, weakness into unbreakable resolve. A species patient enough to prepare for centuries, wise enough to offer mercy even to those who threatened them, and strong enough to make that mercy meaningful rather than foolish. Whether the Council chose war or peace in the years ahead, Thesic understood one final truth clearly, a truth he intended to carry with him for the rest of his days. Humanity remembered every mistake made against them, and humanity would never again make the same mistake twice. Back on Earth, as another quiet shift ended at the monitoring station, Elena gathered her things, preparing to head home after a long, eventful day. Before leaving, she paused one final time at her console, watching the endless stars stretch out beyond the station's window. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, other threats might already be gathering. Other fleets might already be planning their own attempts to test humanity's borders. But Elena no longer felt afraid. She understood now, fully and completely, exactly what Commander Reyes had tried to teach her from the very beginning. Humanity was ready. Humanity would always be ready, and whoever came next, whenever they arrived, would learn the very same lesson taught to every enemy who dared to test humanity's patience before them. As Elena finally stepped away from her console, a soft, quiet chime rang out once more across the room. The sound of the sensor grid detecting yet another distant, unidentified contact, drifting slowly toward the far edge of human territory. Elena paused at the doorway, glancing back toward the screen with a small, knowing smile. This was only the first fleet they had sent. It would not be the last.